Okay. So right now, the world is full of humans, devices, vehicles, and some kind of intelligence and machine learning. And right now, we want to think about how to turn those things into kind of multi-agent systems. Like, how can we get them to work together and think together and ultimately grow together? If we abstract out all of these things that we want to be a part of this new network, they're basically resources that have some interface and are offered as a service. And we can think of both implicit and explicit contracts connecting those things together. So what we ultimately want to do is build this interconnected network of devices, of intelligence, and human-in-the-loop training. The way that models are captured today, there's some action observation that leads to some data that leads to building and training models that hopefully go back into correcting and building more robust models. So we think about the network of how these things fit, right? We have what are considered agents, so those could be anything from your Alexa or Google Home, yourself, or any participant on this network, and its data. So that data goes to training machine learning models. Now, we start talking about this new paradigm, right? What Ethereum, what the blockchain, and what all these other blockchain companies kind of unlock for us, which is decentralization, democratized access to services, and distributed resources like compute and storage. So, what can we do with those things? What we're building is kind of a marketplace, a network, right? We want to give an opportunity for people to use their data to train machine learning models that can go back to be provisioned on this network. Right now, this participation kind of exists in siloed manners, right? So what we're talking about is basically creating a competitive marketplace for resources. So the components and features are that the blockchain provides provenance and data lineage. And that means that we can track who has access to what, who's contributed to what model or what resource. Contracts allow us to create access control and bonded access to service. Our crypto and token provide the ability to transact, as well as how people can participate in those distributed and decentralized services. We can then talk about ontologies, which are kind of a database and schema of those devices, interface, and services that you're able to access across the network. Eventually, you'll have reputation systems where we'll be able to talk about good and bad actors on this system and eventually optimize for those players on the network. The most naive economic model is that you can essentially buy and sell resources, right? So data and machine learning. The pros of this is that it's competitive. We have a decentralized network that anyone can participate in democratically, and it's a little more fair than the current model. A kind of new and emergent economic model that occurs from this is that when you create an open marketplace, when you're able to have anyone participate in contributing data or training machine learning models or provisioning other services, you create this, what we're calling the royalty economy, where you can have a machine learning model, you can have an agent provision data from a user, so everyone's kind of listening to this network in a very decentralized way. If you're familiar with, I know we have a lot of people here from crypto, we have a lot of people here from AI, so I guess the best thing that the blockchain enables right now is that anyone can participate and listen to the blockchain and its events in a very decentralized way. So what you can have is kind of a global event network, right? Where someone goes, okay, I need this particular type of data that's in the ontology. People have local schemas where they can say, I have this data and participate in contract fulfillment. So what we see here is this agent, this AI, that contracts data. It's data hungry. So it creates a contract for data fulfillment. And that data off-chain goes to train the model. Now we have provenance. That model, once it's trained, can then, I guess, provision or announce itself to the network so that other agents and other applications can provision it. And when those applications go to provision that model, they pay for the service. And when that service is paid for, the data that was leveraged to train that model can get paid in perpetuity, right? The people that went to train that model. It's pretty interesting, but that's only the beginning. So this is the royalty economy. It's basically a sum of all the participants and the particular weights of how they participated. Now what that means is because we have access to more agents, we have access to more data, and more data means more robust models and more representative models. But it gets even cooler, right? So we start talking about all of these agents, programmatic agents that are operating on the network, and you have access to all of these different machine learning models and all of these kind of programmatic functions. So if AI is the new electricity, then what we're building is the new decentralized power grid. So now that we have services that can announce themselves on the network and make themselves a part of this network-wide ontology, we have interactions available to autonomous agents like chatbots and things like that that can basically provision superpowers on the fly, right? If one agent needs classification or identification or computer vision in some way, you can actually provision that across the network. So now we're connecting AIs to grow and learn together, which is kind of interesting. Next up, you can start talking about directives capturing. So now that you know who accesses what service and when, you can think about predictive modeling. You can think about contract chaining, so cascading events across the network. You can talk about network optimization, which is kind of interesting and we'll talk about next. You can talk about meta models, so when, under what context do you get to use any particular model. You can also talk about influencer actions and evolutionary programming across the network. So in our case, our directives are basically a set of tasks that accomplish some goal. And so when we're talking about network optimization and contract chaining and directives capturing, what we're doing is we're identifying paths in which to accomplish some task, some directive. So because we identify the tasks and because we have a reputation system and a decentralized network, we can optimize that network, right? We can optimize the path through the network, which is interesting because then you start finding optimized efficiencies in a very decentralized way in all sorts of new and emergent, I think, previously almost unidentified paths, right? And because we can do things like evolutionary programming and give autonomy to and agency to some agents, they can go in and explore, perhaps, and make even cooler, more emergent economies. Ultimately, what we're building can facilitate when an agent goes to participate in a model and train a model and learn from a model, because that model is accessed in a distributed manner, in a very decentralized manner, all the agents that participate in that model also learn just as well. And we've seen that kind of in Google's federated learning, and other people are starting to think in that way. So now we're building open and decentralized networks. We can start talking about distributed compute, distributed storage, and democratize access to that network. Some of the big topics that come out of this when just talking to people, especially talking about the royalty economy and how all of this impacts our lives, universal basic income. Like if we get paid to train kind of automation in perpetuity and more agency is given to these agents on the network, universal basic income starts making sense. Global autonomous logistics and supply chains. So when we apply this network to different industries, and those industries are then connected, and you can see this network path or optimization through every industry working together, you can start making optimizations globally, which is probably the biggest idea here. We can start talking about the future of work and how it'll impact jobs. We can start talking about the future of health, like you have your omic data and you have agents that you can supply that to, you can start unlocking a lot of really big ideas. Talking about adaptive heterogeneous multi-agent systems, and further down the line, I'd say, tongue-in-cheek, we can start talking about AGI, Singularity, and Skynet. So ultimately, what's the impact of this? It's been estimated that there's going to be $11.3 trillion of profit generated from leveraging artificial intelligence by 2035. I think that number is silly. I think that's a small number. I think that the impact that integrating ambient intelligence and intelligence into our lives will create whole new industries and whole new economies that we've never seen before. So, at that point, it almost is silly to even talk about money in that way. But, if you need a number, there it is. So what we're looking for next is we're looking for partners and developers. We're launching our developers fund, and we're interested and eager to work with partners that also want to join this ecosystem. And let's see. Yeah, and that's my presentation. I'm Dan Gailey at synapse.ai. You can find me at dan@synapse.ai. Yeah, cheers. Thanks.